good afternoon. I am so grateful that you have, that you're here with us on Nurture Your Pet. I have been looking for someone like you. And first of all, everyone, let me introduce who Kate is. Kate McGahan. She's a licensed master of social work and a best-selling author. Kate has been a hospice counselor and clinical social worker for over 35 years. She has a master's degree in social work and now lives in Arizona with her two dogs, Emmy and Joey. Kate began writing the Jack McAfghan series in 2015 after the death of her mixed grief Afghan hound, Jack. And let me tell you how I got in touch with Kate. Basically, a few months ago, I lost my dog, my beloved dog, Gina, and the grief I felt was indescribable. And I thought, how do I get through this? How can I be hurting so much? And I thought no one can really relate to this, so I didn't share it much. But I cannot even begin to explain what was going through me. I felt lonely, I had anxiety, I had a lot of pain, I felt empty, but I started getting ill. And then someone told me, maybe you might want to contact a pet loss grief counselor. And I thought, wow, I had never heard of someone like that before. So I went online and I did a little research and I contacted Kate. And I have to say, before contacting her, I read a few things about her and I thought, let me pick up the phone and call her. And Kate, I have to tell you, you sent me an email right away and you sent me a beautiful book for free. And it's called It's Not Putting Me Down, but Lifting Me Up. I read that book 3 times. And it's an ebook which Kate offers to everyone for free. And I will post her website and her link where you can download this ebook for free. I realized that this pain that I'm feeling with the loss of a pet is universal. I was not the only one, and it's huge. It's something where we us pet lovers, pet owners, pet moms, pet dads, we need to understand and we need to be able to share and get help with this because it is real and it's a huge topic. And Kate, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sending me this book. I wish I had known you before, but it's never too late. But you literally held my hand. The first time I read it, I cried. You held my hand. The second time, you held both my hands. I cried less. And the third time, it started making sense. And my journey to healing has already started, like you can see. I mean, normally I would be in tears, but my journey has started. And that's thanks to you. And I am so happy to share with all you viewers what Kate has to say about pet loss and pet grief. Thank you, Kate, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Nita.
Absolutely. Now, let's start with the first question. When this happened, I was like, how can I feel this way? I thought I was this strong person, but what is this grief and why? Why is this so different and so unbearable?
Well, like you said, it's a universal issue. And I'd like to clarify that you talk about my words being as powerful as you say they are. When really, my words are Jack's words. And the power of what we do comes from Jack's perspective and Jack's point of view, because he's the one, our pets are the ones that are so tuned into us and they have an all-knowingness. So when we go through the grief, we need each other and we need the tools to get through it. And the book that you mentioned is just one of those tools. But having the people that have this in common with each other are everywhere. And there are pet owners that are just pet owners. they just own their pets, and they don't get as attached to their dog. They have just a dog or a cat. But there's a large segment, I would bet it's 80% of the population that owns pets are pet lovers. And when the process of loss starts long before the pet passes, unless there's a sudden tragedy, a sudden incident that takes place. So loss is ever present in our minds. We know when we get our pets that we're only going to have them for 10, 15, 20, maybe 21 years. And so we know that the loss is out there every time we get a new pet. But the pets will do well until they get to a point of decline, or based on age, or they have issues that come up earlier in life and we have to deal with them. And so loss is always present as soon as that decline or as soon as that condition starts taking place and manifesting. So anyway, that's loss, but that brings us to the ultimate loss of saying goodbye to our pet. And the ultimate loss is the death of the pet, of course. And when pets become an integral part of a family, or in my experience, I have a Facebook group with over 6,000 members in it, and your viewers are welcome to join our group. I can give them that link to you later. But many of those members are older. Their children have flown the nests. They are maybe widowed. They are maybe retired or disabled, or maybe they're single. And that pet, and we learned with COVID how important a pet is when we're homebound. It's like a magnifying glass on the importance of a pet. So especially those populations, not that married people, and not that anybody else doesn't have a hard time with it, but that seems to be the segment of the population that really is ultimately just attached to their pet. And that loss is like pulling the fibers of love apart from you. And what Jack, my dog, talks about is how we're never separated. Those threads are never split. But it feels like they're being pulled away from us and gone forever. But that's not the case, we find out as we go along the journey. So, and you mentioned shame and guilt. And again, that 80-20% rule, that 80% of the clothes in the closet you wear 20% of the time. Or there's a lot of ways to look at that. But the 80-20 rule also applies with guilt during the process of grief. It's not technically a stage of grief. There's 5 stages of grief, and guilt is not one of the stages, but guilt engulfs the whole scenario. And it's just it's a human tendency for families to raise children with guilt, and for people to internalize guilt and look at life through the lens of guilt. And guilt and shame are sisters. Shame says, I am bad, and guilt says, I feel bad, or I've done something bad. And I wanted to read what Jack says about guilt. It's a very brief quote in one of his books. And when he talks about he's talking about me. She turned on herself. What more could I have done? What did I do wrong? She felt that she had been responsible for my life, and therefore must be responsible for my death as well. She reviewed over and over what she could have done, what she didn't do, what she should have done. As animals, we are innocent until proven guilty, yet people seem to feel guilty until proven innocent. Why do people do this? Where does all that guilt come from? Don't you see that we are all innocent, every last one of us? And he goes on to say that guilt is something that the human mind made up. It's not even real. It's just something that's out there that humans created so they could control each other or make each other feel bad, or, quote, guilt them into doing something that they wouldn't have done otherwise. So Jack's trying to say, get out of the human condition and get into the heart of love, where our animals operate from, and everything would be so much better. Getting out of our heads and into our hearts. because all the turmoil really takes place in our heads.
Yeah, you're right. So, going back to that first part when you said the journey where, you know, you have, well, for example, when Gina passed on, I was frantically looking for her. Kate, I said, how you were right here. How could this incredible spirit just disappear? Where did you go? So that question of where did you go? I think your book and your books helped tremendously with that. And then when you spoke about guilt, I think in a lot of cases, that guilt comes, we feel that when we have to take the ultimate decision. And like I said to you, it's the most horrifying and loneliest decision to take. And we as humans, I know it's inflicted, but we can't help feeling, could we have done something more? So that's where I needed a lot of help with, and I'm sure everyone needs help with that.
Absolutely. That the euthanasia process is the biggest decision. It's got to be one of the major biggest decisions anyone can make in their whole life. And even the veterinarians have trouble with it. So they love their pets, their patients too, and that it's just another pet to a veterinarian, and yet they stumble through this too.
Yeah.
And but yeah, there's so much about euthanasia, and for whatever it's worth, the people that are spiritual and mature in life and have gone through loss and have processed a lot of loss and come out on the positive end of things, they can look at euthanasia and see it as being the kindest, gentlest way to leave this world when you look at so many other tragic ways of a pet leaving this world, of being hit by a car or being taken by a coyote or being in a fire or, living with a major disease or many different kinds of cancers for year after year after year. So euthanasia is really a very beautiful, gentle way for them to go. And yet we associate it only with our loss.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Kate, can you tell us again, why is this relationship so special that we have with our pet? And the reason I want you to tell us again, because I feel that, and I'm asking you this too, I think they are not like us. They have us, their soul is, okay, in my words, more evolved.
Yeah.
And yeah. So can you explain this a bit more for me?
Yeah, I always say I've studied A Course in Miracles all my life, and it's a lot about love versus fear. Love is in the heart, fear is in the head, and love versus ego. Love always does the right thing in the circumstance, but the ego is the part of us that needs to be fed. It needs recognition. It needs admiration. It needs to be loved. It needs. And, they call people egotists for a reason. They're self-centered. It's all about their own needs.
Mm-hmm.
And what our pets are, and of course, there's all different kinds of personalities in a pet. Like my little Joey, he's very needy for my love, but he gives back tenfold. But but that lack of ego, that they're driven only by love, by the love in their hearts. They don't let their minds rule, they let their hearts rule. And they give what most humans have no ability to give, and that's unconditional love. And when we talk about that sector of the population that's so attached to their pets, they're attached to them a lot of the time because maybe they didn't have love growing up, or maybe they didn't have a loving marriage, and maybe this is the first time they've really been loved, especially unconditionally. And that's a lot to lose.
It is.
Yeah, it's a lot to
it's a lot to lose. And Well, I have 4 doggies. I still can't bear to say that I have 3 now. I still, when people ask, I still say I have 4, because I'm still processing. It's taking time, and so I always say I still have 4. But I really, like I said to you, and the other thing, Kate, is why do I say that I feel their souls are so evolved? Because in my daily life, apart from the unconditional love, I watch them, and each one of them, of my 4, have a complete different personality.
Yeah.
And I learn things from them
Yes.
every time. An expression, a behavior. I learn a lot in my daily life from my pets, a lot. And so, in your book, I think when you when Jack was speaking, that's the other thing I loved about your book. Jack, the dog that speaks, and learning lessons through him. And I feel that too. And I think they're fun to have around. They're loving, they're comforting, especially when you have emotional problems or struggling with mental, or anxiety. But also how they move around and everything. They are very, very special.
They are.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the hardest things with losing a pet is stepping forward to you can't ever replace a pet, and you can't ever find that personality. It's like snowflakes. Everyone is so different, even though they're so much alike with what they have to offer.
Yeah.
And going out after you've done your healing to get a new pet is a very complex thing.
Yeah.
And yet each one has different lessons to teach us, and there's reasons for each one coming into our lives. Yeah.
Describe you.
That Jimmy agrees wholeheartedly. We've got UPS here now.
Oh, no problem. Normally you would hear the sound with 4 dogs barking in my house, but right now, no, they're not around. So
oh my gosh.
And please feel free to share them so we can say hi to Ivy and Joey if they're around.
You want to see them?
Yes. Absolutely. Why not?
We're talking.
Hello.
Oh,
hello, Amy.
Down here. Joey. Joey's
hi. Right by your side. Hi, Joey. Oh,
yes. Not very good angles, but there they are.
Thank you for introducing your beloved ones to us and for taking us into your private home with your baby.
Thank you for having me today.
Okay. The other question I have for you is, when again, this is not about me, but the reason it helps to give you an example of me is, for example, this grief. When my doggy passed away, and people would ask me, "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing fine. Let's go for a swim." "Oh, I'm doing fine. Let's go out for a dinner." But when I'm by myself, everything comes crashing down. It's like, so here's the thing. I thought I could get through this grief by myself. I realized that I couldn't. So is this also where you say, can people do it alone? Can one get through this grief alone?
They can, but it's far from ideal. It's going to take a lot longer, and it's going to cause a lot more angst in your mind and in your body. And everybody needs a guide. And maybe it's a book that you read. Maybe you can read books. You can do that on your own. And Jack is a guide in that way. When we talk about working through grief, that there are 5 stages of grief. And based on what you've said to me today and to us, that you're still kind of in the denial stage. You're not really accepting it.
Yeah.
And that's very, very normal. And denial is like shock. Your system has been shocked, and you don't really you're not really processing what's happened. You're numb, basically. And then when you get through that denial phase, you get into the anger phase. And that's where, that's actually a positive because you've got energy. Anger is energy. And you've got energy coming through you where you had none before. And so anger is where you start, that's where really the guilt begins, because you start placing blame and you want others to feel guilty for what they did or they didn't do. Like maybe your vet messed up, or maybe your dad left the gate open and the dog ran out in the road, or you seek, it's natural to seek for people and places to blame. But when you run out of options there, that's when you turn around and you blame yourself and it becomes guilt. So the anger stage is usually where the guilt comes in. And then do you want me to keep going with the phases of grief so you know kind of what to expect?
Yes, please.
You go through that. Now you're feeling guilty. And then you start bargaining. You start saying, if only I'd done this, then this would have been a different outcome. Or if you'd only bring my cat back, I'll do anything, God, just bring my cat back. Or you just start, and you also keep replaying in your mind, like Jack had a tumor. I would keep going back to that tumor because the tumor was the day I realized life wasn't going to be the same again. And he had surgery, but I kept going back to the tumor in my mind and try to find the tumor and then rewind further than that to try to figure out where the tumor came from. Was it what I was feeding him? Was it because he got his butt in the cactus that day and I didn't get all the cactus thorns out? And it's bargaining is all about the mind trying to control what's happened and trying to understand what's happened. And we tend to replay, especially the last moment of life, the last moment on the table, or in my case, the last moment when Jack took his last breath on our kitchen floor, that we get stuck there and we replay that and replay that. And what we need to do is stop replaying it when it comes into our head. That's not what our pet wants us to remember. Our pet wants us to remember them as being vibrant and alive and happy and healthy, not dying on the floor. So when that thought comes into our mind and it's so natural for it to keep creeping back in, you've got to say, no, you're not allowed here. Stay away, go away. And eventually when you do that enough times, it listens to you and it stops coming back to haunt you. So unless you make a special effort of trying to find it again, but it's a powerful process. And then once we get through the bargaining part, when you stop trying to make sense of it all, you go into depression because there was nothing you could do. There was nothing you could do to stop what happened, and you know you're in grief and you know you have to deal with it, and it takes you down to rock bottom sometimes. And that's when we need the support the most, because that's when people can hurt themselves. And people have hurt themselves. They don't want to go on without their pets, and they actually take their own lives sometimes. That's how attached they have been to their pets. And a lot of people say, I just wish I could die too. It's a frequent thing that very attached pet lovers will say, I don't want to be here without him or her. So getting through the depression is a really important part, especially if you're trying to do it alone.
Yeah.
And I want to read this one passage to you about that. But after you get through the depression and you can't go any lower and you come out of it, you finally get to acceptance. And that process can take a couple of months. In my case, I didn't stop crying for 6 months. I didn't stop crying on the anniversary of Jack's death until the 5th year. And I wasn't all out crying, but I had tears. And here I am, the hospice expert, and I'm the grief counselor. And yet, look, even I took 5 years to stop crying on the anniversary of his death. So it's really important. But this is how Jack saw me in the process. This book is The Letters from Rainbow Bridge. Whoops, I don't know if you can see that.
Yes.
It's letters that people wrote to Jack over the years that he answered. So this woman, or this person wrote, "Dear Jack, this grief consumes me and I feel I will never heal. May I ask a personal question? How did Kate heal enough to write your books?" And Jack's response is, "I knew that her grief was only temporary. Being the hospice worker that she is, I knew she knew it too. But when one is grieving, one can forget many things. You can know everything there is to know about something, and then when that something happens to you, everything you ever knew flies out the window. I knew that it would get better. I needed to know this because it made me very sad to see her so tired and unhappy." He's speaking from the other side. "She was thinking she would never be happy again, that she would grieve and cry forever over me. She saw no end in sight to her grief. She had forgotten everything that she had learned. I knew that she would miss me, but I also knew that she would grow from the experience of loving me and losing me, and that in her growth, she would find new strength, compassion, and greater capabilities than she ever had before. I knew that this too would pass. It will pass for you too when the time is right." She was suffering because she needed to adjust to new circumstances in her life, a life that no longer included me. She had a host of physical problems that arose because of her emotionally depressed state, including insomnia that seemed to never end. And we'll talk about this, I think, in a little while too. Autoimmune issues reared their heads, as they are known to do when someone is in a weakened state. Her doctor recommended that she go on prescription medication, but she felt that that too would be a sign of weakness. She was determined to get through this on her own. After all, she always got through everything before. It took a long while, but in her near desperation, she eventually turned to her faith. It was the best thing that she could have done. It's all about faith. Faith comes with healing, healing comes with faith. Faith is the ultimate key to moving forward into a life beyond grief.
I like that very much. Thank you very much for that. And that's exactly what I did. Faith. I started going back into my spirituality, and some questions, a lot of questions were answered, and actually that's how you and I also connected. And I love how you bring that up in your book and books over, not you, Jack brings that up, learning all those lessons. Kate, that's, yes, the grieving process, explaining this to us. I think, yes, a lot. 5 stages, some experience all 5, some maybe 3, but the intensity is huge. And again, you feel that there's no end in sight. And when you also said, Nita, you're probably in denial right now. Yes, I'm sort of still there, because I had Gina cremated, and I still have her ashes, which in a couple of weeks I will go to her favorite place, and with her siblings. She has 3 more siblings, not blood siblings, but they were like siblings, and set those ashes free. And that also, which I appreciated very much in the book that you gifted me, and that is free for everybody. I will post the link to this ebook that everyone can download. You helped me a lot with that chapter too. The chapters that you wrote helped me tremendously. So you have a chapter on how to prepare, and you spoke about ashes, and I'm definitely going to follow that. I thank you so much for that. Now, when we talk about what you just mentioned, the grief that can affect us physically and mentally and emotionally, thank God you're strong enough not to have to be on prescription medication. Neither am I on prescription medication. I am fortunate enough to have a wonderful family that's been supportive. Even though I don't live with them full time, they've all made an effort to come, fly, and be with me, because all my children have pets also. And they realize, my sister and my children, they have pets, and they realize what, I am going through. And, they all have heavy lives, so I never expected this from them, but they all flew down and gave me all the loving, but still, they leave, they go back, and you're again by yourself. And this is where I say, Kate, thank you for your book, and that's why I've read it 3 times. I've had to. Now, when you say watch out, because if you don't do something about it, it can affect you physically and your health. Would you like to elaborate a bit on that so that people have red flags and say, okay, this is not okay. Now I need to see a counselor. Can you warn us about certain things?
Sure, and sometimes it's a counselor, it's a doctor. But it's if anybody has ever studied psychology, if there's a trauma that takes place in your life, whether it's a childhood trauma or abuse, or if it's an accident that happened that never processed, or a death that was never processed, it stays in our being, I don't know if it's in our soul or I don't know where it's stored, but it's stored in our beings. And
Yeah.
I have a thought, I have a story that just came to mind that applies to this, that's very strange, but it gets the point across. I was in a car accident with my mother when I was in my teens, and I was overweight when I was in my teens. And in the accident, my left knee went through the air conditioner, and I had a terrible injury there, but I never told anybody about it because I didn't want them to see my fat leg. I never told anybody about it. I've still got scars on that leg, even though it's not as fat anymore. But about 20 years later, I went to a Reiki practitioner for some healing. And he put his hands on my left knee and he said, "When did you injure your knee?" And because there were no visible signs, but a couple of scars. And I said, "Oh, I never injured my knee." And he said, "Yes, you did. I see a little red car spinning out of control." And my mother had a little red Honda Civic. There's an example of the body remembering what happened without me even realizing that my body remembered, if that makes sense. It's just an extreme version of how our bodies remember things.
Yeah.
But if we don't let the trauma out by talking with someone, and it's all being with someone who cares. That's the best way to let it out. Being with someone or a group, a support group where people are coming from the same place and they're safe. They're not going to say it's just a dog or just a cat. They're very safe and they understand this level of love. If you don't let it out, it stays inside. And sometimes you even say things like, "My heart is broken," or I have a hole in my heart now," or, oh, what else do people say? "I'm dying here," or "It's killing me." All those words can become reality when they're meant with enough force and said enough times that you actually can have a heart issue that's triggered from you saying that your heart is broken. Or you can have, there's so many things you can have, but the heart, I've got it written down here. The lowered immunity, because we're worn down by the grief and we don't have the capability to fight disease and colds and viruses like we would normally. The sleep issues, either too much sleep or too little sleep. In my case, I went many, 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 many nights without sleep until I thought I had dementia. It was so bad. Nutrition, either not eating enough or eating too much to feed your grief. Depression, anxiety. And I noticed, I'm not an alcoholic, but I was drinking more during those days when I was missing Jack. I was having my wine every night. And I knew to stop that because I had it in my family not to be doing that. But I was prone to that. And, I could have become addicted. And people can become addicted to medications and alcohol and work. they can throw themselves into their work where nothing else exists. There's all kinds of addictions. So keeping that inside can create mayhem psychologically and socially and physically.
Yes, we do all that for numbing reasons. And, you know, yeah, so these are important red flags, and if we don't take care and do something about it, I think it can become chronic or life-threatening, or definitely alter your quality of life.
Or
You know,
not to
sorry?
not to mention the suicidal possibilities.
Oh God.
They're low enough. They've been known to do. So really so important.
You know, Kate, that's the thing. I mean, when I was going through it, I live alone with my dogs, and I'm, like I said, I'm grateful that I have a wonderful support system in my family. But I was thinking of people that also live alone, and they don't have that support system. Not that they don't have family, but maybe family lives very far away and don't have the means to come to them, or the family does not really relate and understand what they're going through. So yes, this is where pet grief counselors have become so important. 10 years ago, I never heard of something like that. I mean, I'm telling my mom, and in those days, that's also another thing. I read that chapter in, again, the book that you gifted me. I'm gifting to everyone. You are gifting them to everyone. Is when you sort of replace your pet. So here are my feelings. I want to adopt another little baby. I call them my babies, and bring home. Then again, I stop and I think, is this doing justice? Am I filling a gap? Am I filling a hole here? So many questions. So I'm taking a little bit time, but then again, that chapter that you wrote, or no, excuse me, Jack, in his words says, no, don't feel that you're doing something wrong. So if you would like to elaborate on that too, because that's what stops a lot of people from adopting again another pet into their house.
There's that guilt again. And somewhere in your being, you're saying, is it going to hurt my pet's feelings if I go out and get another pet? It's just a natural thought process. And it is very complex. And people rise to the call of getting another pet at very different stages. I had a personal friend. She was 86 years old. Her name was Jerry. And she had like 30 dogs in her life. And her dog died when she was 86. And she called me up the next day and said, can you go to the rescue and get me another dog? And she says, I wouldn't have had all these dogs in my life and loved all of them if I hadn't been so willing to go right back out and get another pet. So she does it to honor the life. She does it to honor them, to honor the one that's passed.
Yeah.
So there's that situation. And then I remember one woman in our pet loss group. She'd been a member for quite a while. She'd had a German Shepherd that was her heart and soul. And she was talking about the grief very dramatically and tragically. And eventually we found out that she had lost her German Shepherd 14 years before. And she was still going through this grief process. She hadn't talked to anybody about it, so she never resolved it till she finally came to our group. And our group is really good at resolution. So we have one extreme to the other. But Jack also talks about, we have a trilogy, which is storybooks. It's a storybook journey through life and loss and grief. And he talks about the fact that there's another pet that's destined to come into your life. And sometimes the grief process is such that the timing is just perfect, whether it's a couple of months or whether it's 6 months or more. The timing is perfect for that one special pet to come into our lives at that particular time. So, which came first, the perfect pet or the timing? They all have to blend together to be just right. And I learned that from my Emmy. Emmy's my Afghan hound. I drove up, I'm in Arizona, and I drove up to Montana when I heard about an Afghan that needed a home. And I was attracted to this particular dog because it had Jack's eyes. I saw the eyes, the brown eyes. That's like, I've got to have that dog. But that's a mistake to try to replace based on something like that. By the time I got to Montana, the dog had found another home, but he had one other dog there that might need a home. So I got to meet Georgie. And Georgie was a really beautiful, big, black Afghan hound. And he was wonderful, but he just didn't feel right to me. And I thought, I've come all this way not to feel right about Georgie. Maybe I should take Georgie anyway. And then the guy said, I do have one other. And there was Emmy. She was off doing her own thing. She'd been kind of abused on the show circuit and wasn't doing her part. So they sent her back to the breeder. And she was out there in the backyard, and one thing led to another. I brought Emmy home. The neat thing about the whole story is that about 2 weeks later, one of the breeder's other customers called to see if he had a dog for them, and they had Georgie's sister, and they ended up with Georgie, and Georgie went home with his sister. So there's a lot of things.
See, yes. Sorry, I'm reaching over.
It's okay.
There's two very strong quotes that resonated that I wanted to share with everyone. Someday, whenever the world gets to be too much, even when I'm gone, put your hands on your heart, because that is where I will be. I will remind you that your power is in your heart, not in your head. And this helps me in the sense that, yes, I am thinking very strongly of adopting again. And like you said, that guilt, I should not be feeling that. And again, you explained that whole process beautifully, and you explain why and everything in your book. I read your book 3 months after Gina passed away, but I strongly advise everyone who has a pet already to start reading it, because I wish that I had read it before. It helps, and it is an inevitable situation that we all have to face. Now, you also wrote something that is so important, and I had no clue what to do, Kate.
Yeah.
When the vet tells you that moment, the vet says, okay, we've done everything we can, and I think it's time to let go and relieve your pet out of the suffering. Can you share again with us? I'll give you a highlight here. The moment, live in the moment. So what did Jack say? What does Jack want us to do with our pets when we know we've got a day or two or maybe an hour? What is it?
Well, most of all, he wants us to set the telephone aside and the iPad and the computer, and set that all aside and make time, make them everything. Because how much time do we have left? And we can give up all those things in the amount of time they have left to make them our priority, and love them, and give them, if they want to scrap a meat off the table, well, now's not the time to be denying them that. Yeah. And just, and really, I think some people understand this, but a lot of people don't think that pets understand as much as they really do. And when you speak to the pet, again, heart to heart, because they speak with their hearts, they think with their hearts. So when we talk to them from our heads, unless we're picturing something in our minds, they're not going to pick up on it as much as when we talk directly from our hearts. And that time prior to the appointment, is the ideal time to say everything you need to say, and ask them. I don't know if all of your viewers believe that we get signs from the afterlife, but dreams, clouds, rainbows, feathers, unique ways of them coming forward, letting us know that they're with us. And I've got a whole book coming out on that. But to ask them to send a sign after they're gone, to send them something, to have them send you something, so you know that validates the fact that they're still with you, only gone from sight. And also trying to stay in a comfortable place. And if you need to cry, it's okay to shed tears, but try to stay as relaxed as you can, because you know how our pets get when we're upset. They get upset too. Yeah. So if you try to, you can let loose afterwards, but try to keep the peace in the moment to help them be peaceful in the moments that are approaching.
Yeah. And see, I didn't know that. I cried a lot. Mm-hmm. I did thank Gina, but I cried a lot. And I didn't ask Gina to give me signs later, and I wish I had. And that's why this interview is so important, because I didn't do that, and I have regrets, and I don't. That's why I'm so strongly saying to everyone, please read the book of Kate McGahan. It's absolutely free, and she has many other books that she's written, and you can order from her website directly. But in this free book, she gives advice on how to be the last moments that you are with your pet. And I did not. I didn't ask Gina to give me messages. But like you said, we speak from the heart, right?
Yeah, something else you don't know, and I don't know if it was in the book, but it is never too late to talk with them and be with them. And it's never too late to ask now what you need from them. It's never too late. You speak to her just like she's there, because she is there, and only in different form. You just can't see her. Jack always says it's like a dog whistle. You know, we can't hear the whistle. It's so high, but all the dogs come running. And it's the same thing. You know, we can't see them, but they're just in another level of vibration beyond the veil, right here in our midst. We just can't see them. So you can talk to her and him anytime.
Yeah, you're right. You know, I think I'm definitely going to do that today. Sorry, I lose a moment, because talking with you, I go down that journey again, and you see these incredible, beautiful, innocent eyes, and every time, I've said this before, I would look at her, which I do with my other pets also, because like I said, they all have different personalities, and I'm sure all the viewers also know that they come with such adorable, endearing personalities. But Gina was something else. You know, here I am being again. She was something else, because she was just a ball of light, a ball of energy. And like I said to you, I learned so much from her, and there has been a lot of growth for me personally since she has, crossed over. There was a quote that you wrote: "Death forces change." Well, Jack wrote that. "It's the final stage of growth for the one who is dying. And it's a teacher that forces the growth of the one who remains." And I remain, and I feel, I've learned so much from her. Even her passing there's been a lot of growth. I wish the growth was not that painful, though. I wish, it didn't take so much pain and loss. But yeah, spiritually, I think I'm stronger.
That's what she wants.
Yes, that's what she wanted, right?
Yep, yes. That's what she wants now. She wants you to be strong and full of faith and full of love.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of you, what you're doing.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. So, Kate, Is there anything you want to share further with the viewers about the loss of a pet? Is there anything you want to share with us or Jack wants to share? Please do.
I just made a couple notes down here to mention a couple things. A lot of people feel that human beings think that they can control everything until they find out they can't really control that much except how they react to something.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that feel guilty because maybe, like in your case, you couldn't be with her when she passed, right? So that's ever present in your mind. And there's others that say they want to be with their pet when at that moment when they pass, but they were at work and they came home and their pet had passed anyway, and they feel so guilty that they weren't there with their pet when it's totally beyond your situation was beyond control, and so are most of these situations. So I wanted to mention a friend of mine when I lived in Sedona. She had a Cocker Spaniel named Barney, and I think he was about 15 or 16, and they had an amazing life together living in an RV, and then she had a house, and then she got married, and here's Barney through everything. And that solidifies our relationship too when you go through all those life changes. And so Barney was on his way walking towards Rainbow Bridge, and she took the week off from work to be with him for every minute of every day. And I think she hung out on the floor with him for at least 3 or 4 days. And one night, it was nearing midnight, she had to leave his side to go to the bathroom. She went to the bathroom and came back, and he had died while she was in the bathroom. And that's the perfect example of how we can't control, and how there's an element of control in our pets when they die naturally, that they can wait a little longer or they can go a little earlier. And it happens in human beings too. If they have a reason to wait or a reason to leave sooner, they do. So in that case, she couldn't say she felt guilty for not being with him, because she left for that moment and he made the choice. He did not want her to see him take his final breath. So I'm asking the viewers, if they've been through this, to please go easy on themselves, because there's only so much control they have. And our pets are in more control of those things than we think they are. So there's that. And for those going through things alone, I would seriously think about joining an online pet loss group. Is great because you're still alone, but you can still engage if you want to, and you can learn from others and maybe be inspired to share your story too. So that would be the safest way if you tend to be shy and introverted or feeling like you're not important, because you are so important. You need a place to express yourself. But there's also local hospices that would be happy to sit down with a grief counselor for a session if you called a local hospice, or even a friend that's somebody that understands, just somebody that can be a sounding board for you, so you don't keep those things internalized.
Absolutely. And, when I started talking to people about my loss, there's one thing that has been very badly underestimated. We think it's women that only grieve the loss of their pets, but the men, I have seen so many men that are grieving and have shared. And I thought, wow, this is a segment that this is we underestimated, and that's so important that men are now able to also come out and say, I've lost, and not a big, even a small little dog.
Especially the little ones. I know, it's true.
I'm very happy that the men are coming forward and saying how much they're grieving too, because for the longest of time, this has been maybe a kind of taboo subject. But I'm happy to hear that we are evolving, and our consciousness is now rising a bit better, where we, as hopefully humanity, that we have more respect for our pets and able to share that, nurture them, and realize and appreciate how much they have nurtured us and continue nurturing us. Right, Kate?
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Thank you for bringing that to light. Yes.
Absolutely. Kate, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I also am going to post the website to all you viewers and all her details, how to get in touch with her, how to get her ebook, and how to buy all the other incredible books that she's written. It is so, so important. And only when it happened to me did I realize, wow, how important this topic is for all of us.
When it happened to me, it made it important too. Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you, Nita.
I loved talking to you. It's soothing and always calming, but your books are, again, it's a lot of knowledge from Jack.
Thank you. He was a special boy. Yeah. He's
Yeah.
the reason we're together today.
Yes, he is. He is. No coincidence.
No. God bless you, Jen.
God bless you. Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Bye.